I was looking for grocery coupons when I found it. A golden envelope buried under a stack of flyers in our kitchen drawer, embossed with Alyssa's company logo in elegant script. My name was printed on the front in formal lettering, Mr. Daniel Brooks. I held it up as Alyssa walked into the kitchen and watched her face change from casual indifference to panic in about 2 seconds. "You weren't supposed to find that," she blurted, stepping between me and the drawer like she could somehow make the invitation disappear. I unfolded the thick cardstock, reading the details of Vanguard Corporation's annual gala. Black tie, partners and spouses welcome. RSVP required. So I was invited? I asked quietly. "Daniel, it's complicated. You wouldn't understand." Her tone was the same one she used when explaining why I couldn't join her work conversations or why she introduced me to her colleagues as just a freelancer. That careful condescension that suggested I was too simple to grasp the complexities of her corporate world. "You're right," I said, setting the invitation down on the counter. "I probably wouldn't understand." But as I looked at my wife's guilty face, I understood perfectly. She was embarrassed by me. The question was, what was I going to do about it? My name is Daniel Brooks. Before I tell you how it all started, I have to ask you for a favor. Write in the comments where you're watching me from, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Your help is very important. What I'm about to share with you is something I never thought could happen in my own home, under my own roof, to the person I'd spent my entire life trying to protect. This is a story about trust, betrayal, and the kind of evil that hides behind a smile. My wife hid my invitation to her company's gala because she thought I'd embarrass her. I walked outside into the cold evening air, my hands shoved deep in my pockets, anger simmering beneath the surface. For 3 years, I'd watched Alyssa climb the corporate ladder at Vanguard Corporation while treating my work like a hobby that would eventually fade away. She had no idea that her husband's little coding project was about to change both our lives forever. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from my business partner Marcus. "The deal's finalized. They signed this afternoon." I smiled for the first time in days. Alyssa thought I wasn't good enough for her professional world. She was about to learn exactly how wrong she was. The memory took me back to our tiny apartment 4 years ago. I'd been working late nights at our kitchen table, surrounded by empty coffee cups and notebooks filled with code, building what I believed would revolutionize logistics software. Alyssa had walked in after another 12-hour day at her entry-level position, looking tired and frustrated. "You're still playing with that project?" she'd asked, not bothering to hide her irritation. "It's not a game," I'd said without looking up from my laptop screen. "This is going to work." She'd laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You said that last year, Daniel. And the year before that. And I'll say it until it does," I'd whispered, returning to my code. Back then, I'd thought her skepticism came from concern about our financial future. I'd thought she was protecting us from disappointment. Now I realized she was protecting herself from being associated with someone she considered a failure. That night, working under our dim kitchen light, I'd added another function to my program, a logistics optimization algorithm that could reduce shipping costs by 30%. I'd had no idea that function would eventually make me a millionaire. 6 months after finding my footing with the software development, Alyssa had invited her work colleagues over for dinner. I'd been excited to finally meet the people she talked about constantly, hoping to make a good impression. The evening had gone well until one of her coworkers, a sharp-dressed man named Trevor, had asked about my work. "You're still freelancing?" he'd said, like the word tasted bad in his mouth. Before I could explain my software company, Alyssa had laughed and answered for me. "Oh, Daniel's a dreamer," she'd said, patting my arm like I was a child. "He's always working on some big project that's going to change the world." The table had fallen into embarrassed silence. Trevor had nodded politely and changed the subject to something about quarterly reports and market analysis. I'd excused myself to clear dishes, standing in our kitchen while my wife's colleagues discussed careers and promotions in the next room. They talked about networking and advancement opportunities, about the kind of professional success that apparently didn't include whatever it was I did. That night, after everyone had left, I'd gone back to my laptop and worked until sunrise. If Alyssa wanted to be embarrassed by her dreamer husband, I'd give her something real to be proud of. Or so I'd thought. The worst conversation had happened when Alyssa's father visited from Phoenix. Harold Wellington was a retired bank executive who'd made his opinions about my career choices very clear from the beginning. "You're wasting your daughter's potential," he told me over coffee, not bothering to lower his voice even though Alyssa was in the next room. "I'm building something that could be very successful," I'd replied, trying to keep my tone respectful. "Software projects are hobbies, Daniel. Real men provide stability, security, a future their wives can count on." The devastating part wasn't Harold's criticism. The devastating part was watching Alyssa nod in agreement. She hadn't defended me or my work. She hadn't mentioned the late nights I'd spent building something from nothing, or the small clients who were already seeing real results from my logistics platform. She'd just nodded, like her father was stating an obvious truth. That night, after Harold had gone to bed in our guest room, I'd added another feature to my software, a real-time tracking system that could monitor shipments across multiple carriers simultaneously. One day, I'd whispered to my laptop screen, "You'll both understand what you're looking at." I'd had no idea how prophetic those words would turn out to be. The breaking point had come during an argument about money 3 months ago. I'd been late with my half of the rent because a client had delayed payment, and Alyssa had been furious. "This is exactly what I'm talking about, Daniel," she'd said, pacing around our living room. "You're not Steve Jobs. You're not going to revolutionize anything from our kitchen table. I'm building something real," I'd replied, trying to stay calm. "The client base is growing. The software actually works. Working software doesn't pay our bills. Stable employment pays our bills. Give me more time." She'd stopped pacing and stared at me with a mixture of frustration and what might have been pity. "You're 32 years old. When are you going to stop chasing fantasies and start building a real career? When are you going to start believing in your husband?" "I believe in reality. And the reality is that you'll never make it past your laptop." That sentence had hit me like a physical blow. Not because it was cruel, but because it revealed what my wife really thought about my potential. I'd replied evenly, "No, but I'm not done yet, either." The conversation had ended there, but something fundamental had shifted between us that night. 2 weeks after that argument, I'd made a decision that surprised even me. I'd rented a small office space across town, just a converted garage with decent internet and enough room for a desk and filing cabinet. "I need space to focus," I told Alyssa as I packed my laptop and development materials. "Fine," she'd said, not looking up from her work emails. "Have all the space you want." She'd thought I was having some kind of midlife crisis, moving my hobby out of the house so I could pretend to be a real businessman. What she didn't know was that I'd already landed my third major client, and my software was processing over 50,000 shipping calculations per month. I'd locked the garage door that first evening and looked around my new workspace. One desk, one chair, one laptop, and a dream that my wife considered laughable. "This is where it starts," I'd said to myself. The irony was that Alyssa had been right about one thing. I didn't need to stop working from our kitchen table. I needed a real office for the company I was about to build. The next 6 months had been the hardest of my life. 12-hour days in that garage, surviving on coffee and determination, while client after client tested my logistics platform. Some days, I'd gotten 3 rejection emails before lunch. Other days, I'd spend hours debugging code that should have worked perfectly, but somehow didn't. Alyssa had barely asked about my work during this period. When I came home exhausted at night, she'd be watching television or preparing for the next day at Vanguard Corporation. "How's the coding club going?" she'd ask sometimes, not really listening to my answer. "It's growing," I'd reply. She'd nod and change the subject to something about her boss or a colleague's promotion or the office politics that seemed to consume all her energy. My voice narrates over those memories. No one believed in me, not even her. But on a Tuesday in March, everything had changed. My phone had buzzed with an email that made me read the sender's name 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. "Mr. Brooks, we're interested in discussing your logistics platform for potential implementation across our national network. Please contact us at your earliest convenience. Elliot Kearns, CEO, Vanguard Logistics Solutions." Vanguard Logistics Solutions, the parent company of Vanguard Corporation, Alyssa's company. The meeting with Elliot Kearns had taken place in a glass conference room 40 stories above the city. I'd worn my best suit and carried a presentation folder that contained 2 years of development work. "You built this entire platform yourself?" Elliot had asked, scrolling through my software demonstration on his laptop. Every line of code, I'd confirmed, watching him test the real-time tracking features. And you're currently processing how many transactions per month? About 200,000, across 12 different shipping carriers. Elliot had leaned back in his chair, studying me with the kind of attention I'd never received from anyone in Alyssa's professional circle. Daniel, what you've created here could revolutionize how we handle logistics across our entire network. We're talking about potential savings in the millions. He'd spent the next hour asking technical questions that proved he actually understood what my software could do. Unlike my wife, who dismissed it as a hobby, Elliot recognized innovation when he saw it. We'd like to license your platform, he'd said finally. Full integration across all Vanguard properties, with you staying on as technical director. I'd signed the contract that afternoon, my hand shaking slightly as I wrote my name. My hobby had just become a multi-million-dollar partnership. That evening, I'd received a text from Alyssa. Hope your coding club is going well, winking face. The emoji had felt like a small knife. Even now, after everything I'd accomplished, she still saw my work as something to mock. I'd replied simply, it's growing. What I hadn't told her was that her company had just acquired licensing rights to my software for $3 million, plus ongoing royalties. What I hadn't mentioned was that I was now officially a technical partner with Vanguard Logistics Solutions. What I kept to myself was that her CEO had personally invited me to attend the annual company gala as an honored guest. I closed my laptop that night and stared at a new email in my inbox. Vanguard Corporation Annual Gala, Partner Invitation enclosed. The same gala Alyssa had hidden my invitation to. The same event where she'd planned to attend without her embarrassing husband. I'd opened the attachment and read Elliot's personal note. Daniel, please join us for an evening celebrating innovation and partnership. Looking forward to introducing you to the team. For the first time in months, I'd smiled thinking about my wife's reaction to something. This was going to be interesting. The partnership negotiations had moved quickly after that first meeting. Elliot had introduced me to his technical team, and within 2 weeks, we'd hammered out an implementation plan for rolling out my software across their entire network. We're not just licensing this, Elliot had explained during our second meeting. We're buying in completely. You'll be a full partner with equity and decision-making authority. The numbers had been staggering. Base payment, plus percentage of savings generated, plus stock options in the parent company. You understand what this means? Marcus, my business partner, had asked after reviewing the contract terms. That I'm about to be very busy? That you're about to be very rich? But the money hadn't been the most satisfying part. The most satisfying part had been reading the company name on all the official documents. Vanguard Corporation. The same Vanguard Corporation where my wife worked as a senior analyst. The same company whose CEO now had my personal phone number and considered me a valued partner. The same organization that Alyssa thought I wasn't sophisticated enough to understand. I'd confirmed the partnership details twice, just to make sure I wasn't misreading something. My software company was now officially integrated with my wife's employer. Life, it seemed, had a sense of humor. I'd spent the week before the gala making final preparations for the software rollout. My development team was working around the clock to ensure seamless integration with Vanguard's existing systems. Elliot had called me personally to discuss the timeline. Daniel, I want to make the partnership announcement at Friday's gala, he'd said. The entire company will be there, including our board of directors and major stakeholders. That sounds perfect. I'll be introducing you during my keynote address. Full partner recognition, official welcome to the Vanguard family. I'm honored. You've earned it. This platform is going to transform how we operate. After hanging up, I'd sat in my office looking at the formal invitation that had arrived by courier that morning. Mr. Daniel Brooks, technical partner, Vanguard Logistics Solutions. The same invitation Alyssa had hidden from me. The same event she'd planned to attend while pretending she didn't have a husband. I'd emailed Elliot back. I'd like to attend the gala personally. Looking forward to meeting the team. His response had been immediate. Excellent. See you Friday evening. Alyssa had no idea that her company's new technical partner was sleeping in the bed next to her every night. The week leading up to the gala, I'd told no one about my partnership with Vanguard. Not my friends, not my family, and certainly not my wife. I'd continued working from my garage office, taking calls from Elliot and his team, while Alyssa assumed I was still chasing my startup dreams. She'd mentioned the gala several times that week, talking about her dress and which colleagues would be attending. It's really just for employees and senior management, she'd said one morning over coffee. Spouses usually find it pretty boring. I'm sure it's a lovely event. Oh, it is. Very elegant. Very professional. The implication was clear, very much not my kind of scene. I'd spent those days training my technical team on the integration protocols and reviewing presentation materials with Elliot's staff. A reminder email had arrived Wednesday. Formal gala this Friday. Attendance confirmed. D. Brooks, technical partner. Friday couldn't come fast enough. I'd been looking forward to this evening for months, though not for the reasons Alyssa might have expected. This wouldn't be about proving myself to her colleagues or gaining access to her professional world. This would be about revealing that I'd been building something bigger than she'd ever imagined. Friday evening arrived gray and cold, with the kind of autumn weather that made formal events feel extra elegant. I'd been ready for hours, my tuxedo pressed and my speech notes reviewed. Alyssa had spent 2 hours getting ready, emerging from our bedroom in a stunning silver dress that probably cost more than my first computer. "You look beautiful," I'd said, and meant it. "Thank you. I'm nervous about tonight. Mr. Kearns is supposed to make some big announcement." "Oh, something about a new partnership. Corporate expansion. You know how these things go." I'd nodded knowingly. "Sounds important." "Very. This could affect promotions, department restructuring, everything." She'd checked her appearance one final time in our hall mirror, then kissed me goodbye on the cheek. "Don't wait up," she'd said. "These things usually run late." "Wouldn't dream of it," I'd answered. After her car disappeared down our street, I'd straightened my bow tie and headed to my own car. Time to attend my wife's company party, the party where I was the guest of honor. The Vanguard Corporation Gala was held at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel downtown, the kind of venue that specialized in corporate events and charity fundraisers. Cameras flashed as elegantly dressed couples entered the marble lobby. I'd arrived fashionably late, wanting to make sure Alyssa had time to settle in with her colleagues before I made my entrance. The ballroom was impressive, crystal chandeliers, round tables with white linens, a stage set up for presentations. Several hundred people mingled with cocktails, the conversations mixing business strategy with social pleasantries. I'd spotted Alyssa immediately. She was standing near the bar with a group of colleagues, laughing at something someone had said. She looked confident and relaxed, completely in her element. Then I'd stepped into the room, and the murmurs had started. "Who's that? Is he on the guest list?" "I don't recognize him." I'd walked calmly through the crowd, nodding politely to people I didn't know, making my way toward the check-in table where a young woman with a tablet was managing the guest list. "Name, please," she'd asked. "Daniel Brooks." She'd scrolled through her list, then looked up with a bright smile. "Of course. Mr. Brooks, we're so honored to have you here tonight." Across the room, I'd seen Alyssa's smile fade as she spotted me. This was about to get interesting. Alyssa had rushed through the crowd toward me, her face cycling through confusion, panic, and something that might have been anger. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" "I found my invitation," I'd said calmly, adjusting my cufflinks. "Your invitation? But She'd glanced around nervously, probably hoping none of her colleagues were witnessing this conversation. "You need to leave," she'd whispered urgently. "This is a company event. My boss knows I'm here." I'd interrupted. She'd stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "What do you mean? He knows you're here." "I mean, Elliot invited me personally." "Elliot? You don't even know my boss's name." "Elliot Kearns, CEO of Vanguard Logistics Solutions. We've been working together for several months now." Alyssa's face had gone white. Around us, the cocktail party continued. But I could see several of her colleagues watching our conversation with obvious curiosity. "Daniel, what are you talking about? Working together on what?" Before I could answer, the lights had dimmed and Elliot Kearns had walked onto the stage, approaching the podium with the kind of confidence that comes from running a billion-dollar company. "Good evening, everyone." His voice had boomed through the sound system. "Thank you all for joining us for this very special celebration." Elliot's presence commanded the entire ballroom. Conversation stopped, drinks were lowered, and all attention focused on the stage where the CEO stood with obvious pride. "Tonight, we celebrate more than just another successful year for Vanguard Corporation," he'd announced, his voice carrying easily through the sound system. Tonight, we celebrate partnership, growth, innovation. I'd felt Alyssa standing frozen beside me, probably trying to process what was happening while maintaining her professional composure. We live in an era where technology can transform entire industries overnight, Elliot had continued. Companies that embrace innovation thrive. Companies that resist change fall behind. He'd paused, looking out over the audience with the timing of someone who'd given many speeches. 6 months ago, a brilliant software engineer approached us with a logistics platform that could revolutionize how we handle shipping, tracking, and supply chain management. Another pause. The room was completely silent now. That platform is now fully integrated into our operations, saving millions of dollars and positioning Vanguard as an industry leader in logistics technology. Elliot had smiled, building toward his announcement. Tonight, I'm proud to introduce you to our newest strategic partner. He'd looked directly at me. Mr. Daniel Brooks. The spotlight had hit me immediately, bright and warm and completely surreal. The applause had been thunderous. Around me, 300 people had started clapping while I'd stood there, trying to process the moment I'd been working toward for months. Alyssa's champagne glass had slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor with a sound that somehow cut through the applause. I'd walked toward the stage, shaking hands with colleagues and board members I'd never met, accepting congratulations from people who'd probably never imagined that the man they were applauding had been dismissed as a dreamer by his own wife. Elliot had shaken my hand firmly when I'd reached the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, he'd announced, Daniel Brooks has created something truly revolutionary. His vision and technical expertise will redefine how Vanguard operates in the digital age. I'd accepted the microphone, looking out at the audience of Alyssa's colleagues, the same people who'd politely ignored me at dinner parties and networking events. Thank you, Elliot, I'd said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. It's an honor to be part of the Vanguard team. When I started developing this logistics platform, I believed it could make a real difference in how companies handle complex shipping challenges. The audience had listened respectfully, and I'd continued. I'm looking forward to building something even stronger together. More applause, more handshakes, more congratulations from people who'd never bothered to ask what I did for work. And through it all, Alyssa had stood frozen at the back of the room. After my brief speech, I'd made my way backstage where Elliot was waiting with several board members and senior executives. Brilliant introduction, Elliot had said, clapping me on the shoulder. I think you impressed some very important people tonight. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the innovation. This partnership is going to be very profitable for everyone involved. I'd spent 20 minutes meeting VPs and department heads, discussing implementation timelines and expansion plans. These were the kinds of conversations Alyssa had always assumed I was too unsophisticated to participate in. When I'd finally returned to the main ballroom, she'd been waiting near the backstage entrance, her professional composure barely intact. Daniel, we need to talk. Of course. She'd led me to a quiet corner away from the cocktail crowds. You could have told me about this, she'd said, her voice tight with what might have been embarrassment or anger. You could have invited me, I'd replied calmly. That's different. I didn't know you were. I mean, I had no idea you were working with my company. You never asked what I was working on. You never told me it was this successful. I'd looked at my wife, beautiful and accomplished and completely unable to understand what had just happened. You hid my invitation because you thought I'd embarrass you, I'd said gently. Daniel, I need to get back to the reception. Elliot wants me to meet some potential clients. I'd walked away, leaving her standing alone by the backstage area. By Monday morning, the news had spread throughout Vanguard Corporation like wildfire. I'd heard about it from Marcus, who'd heard about it from a friend who worked in their marketing department. Did you hear what happened at the gala? Became the standard conversation starter in break rooms and hallways. That was Alyssa's husband, the new partner. She never mentioned he was in tech. Didn't she always say he was just a freelancer? The gossip cycle was brutal and swift. Within 3 days, everyone at Vanguard knew that Alyssa Wellington from Strategic Analysis was married to the technical genius their CEO had just made a full partner. The same woman who'd apparently been less than enthusiastic about her husband's professional prospects. Marcus had called me Wednesday afternoon with an update. Your wife's having a rough week, he'd said. My contact in HR says she's been called in for 2 separate performance evaluations. About what? Attitude, team dynamics, professional judgment. I'd felt a flicker of sympathy for Alyssa, but it had passed quickly. She'd made her choices about how to treat my career ambitions. Now she was dealing with the professional consequences of those choices. How's the software integration going? I'd asked, changing the subject. Ahead of schedule. Elliot's team is fantastic to work with. Indeed they were. Unlike my wife, they recognized innovation when they saw it. Thursday evening, Alyssa had finally swallowed her pride enough to invite me to dinner at our favorite restaurant downtown. She'd chosen a quiet table in the back, away from other diners. I owe you an apology, she'd said after we'd ordered. For what specifically? For hiding your invitation. For not believing in your work. For treating you like your career didn't matter. I'd listened without interrupting, watching her struggle to find words for feelings she'd probably never examined before. I was scared, she'd continued. Scared of instability. Scared of taking risks. I thought I was protecting us from disappointment. You were protecting yourself from being associated with someone you considered a failure. She'd winced at the directness of that assessment. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you introduced me to your colleagues as anything other than just a freelancer? Silence. When was the last time you asked about my projects with genuine interest instead of condescending concern? More silence. I'm sorry, she'd said finally. I was wrong about everything. Yes, you were. Can we move past this? Can we rebuild what we had? I'd looked at my wife across the table, remembering the woman I'd fallen in love with and recognizing how far we'd both traveled from that place. I don't think so, Alyssa. I'd left cash for the check and walked out of the restaurant, leaving her sitting alone at the table. The call from Elliot had come the following Monday morning. Daniel, I need to discuss some organizational changes with you. What kind of changes? We're restructuring several departments to better support the technology integration. You'll be our lead partner on all technical initiatives moving forward. What does that mean exactly? Expanded authority, larger team, significant equity increase. You'll essentially be running our entire digital transformation initiative. The promotion had been substantial, both in terms of responsibility and compensation. I'd gone from technical consultant to senior partner in less than 6 months. There is one other matter, Elliot had continued. We're eliminating some redundant positions in strategic analysis. Budget cuts, mostly. I see. Your wife's position is being restructured. We're offering her a contractor role on a project basis, but her full-time position has been eliminated. I'd thanked Elliot for the update and hung up, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and sympathy. Alyssa's job security, the thing she'd prioritized over supporting my dreams, had just evaporated. Meanwhile, the career she'd dismissed as a fantasy had made me one of the most powerful people in her former company. There was poetry in that irony, even if it felt cruel. Alyssa had shown up at my office the following week, looking smaller somehow than I'd ever seen her. My secretary had announced her as a visitor, which felt appropriate given that she no longer worked for the same company. I made a mistake, she'd said, sitting across from my mahogany desk in the executive office that came with my new position. Several mistakes. I mean about us. About our marriage. About believing in you. I'd looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and felt something that might have been closure. We both made mistakes, Alyssa. I married someone who didn't believe in me. You married someone whose potential you couldn't recognize. I can change. You shouldn't have to. You should marry someone whose career ambitions you naturally respect, not someone you have to learn to support. Daniel, please. Security had arrived then, not because I called them, but because her visitor pass had expired and building policy required escorted exit after hours. I'm sorry, I'd said as she'd gathered her purse. But this conversation is over. She'd left without arguing, which was probably the first wise choice she'd made regarding our relationship in months. The divorce papers had been filed the following week. 6 months later, I'd been featured on the cover of Regional Business magazine, the self-made partner who changed the game. The interview had focused on innovation, persistence, and the importance of believing in your own vision even when others don't. Success isn't revenge, I told the journalist. Success is proof that you were right to keep going when everyone else told you to quit. The article had mentioned my partnership with Vanguard, the revolutionary impact of my logistics platform, and my plans for future technological development. It hadn't mentioned my divorce, though the business community was well aware that my personal life had changed significantly since my professional breakthrough. I'd kept a copy of the magazine in my office, not out of ego, but as a reminder of how far determination could take someone when they refused to accept other people's limitations. The same week the article was published, I'd received a final text message from Alyssa. I saw the magazine cover. I'm proud of what you've accomplished, even if I don't have the right to be proud anymore. I hope you find happiness. I deleted the message without responding. Some bridges were meant to stay burned. My focus now was on building the technology company I'd always envisioned, surrounded by people who shared my belief in innovation and possibility. People who recognized potential instead of dismissing it. Today, I walked through the lobby of Vanguard Tower, nodding to colleagues and partners who now sought my opinion on major strategic decisions. The building directory listed my name among the senior partners, a permanent reminder of what persistence and vision could accomplish. In the lobby coffee shop, I noticed a familiar figure working at a corner table with a laptop and contractor badges. Alyssa was back in the building, fulfilling the project-based work Elliot had offered her after her position was eliminated. Our eyes had met briefly across the crowded cafe. I'd nodded politely, the way you acknowledge any former colleague, and continued to the elevator. She hid my invitation because she thought I didn't belong. I reflected as the elevator carried me to the executive floor. It turned out I owned the table she was sitting at. I'd built everything I'd dreamed of building, just not with the person I'd originally planned to share it with. Alyssa had been wrong about my potential, but she'd been right about one thing. Success had definitely changed our relationship, just not in the way she'd expected. Please subscribe, because sometimes the best revenge isn't proving someone wrong about you. Sometimes the best revenge is proving yourself right. My name is Daniel Brooks, and this is the story of how being underestimated became the greatest motivation I'd ever received.